Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special Talking Some episode. We have Drew with us from The Anxious Truth. Welcome.
Hey, Dan. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. I'm super, super excited. As I mentioned to you, several people from our community have said, hey, you got to get Drew on. So I'm so happy you're here. And by the way, for the 2% who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
I'm Drew Linsalata. I am creator and host of a podcast called The Anxious Truth, which you'll find all the stuff at theanxioustruth.com if you don't know. I focus on the topic of anxiety disorders, and recovery. I am a podcaster, a psychoeducator. I'm a graduate student on the way to being a licensed psychotherapist. So, but not a therapist yet. So keep that in mind as you listen to me.
Very, very well.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I thought today you have so much content on your podcast about kind of like a lot of the details, and our podcast is similar when it comes to insomnia. So I thought we could talk about like real big picture things, but starting off with a topic that's always so interesting, which is how do you become Drew of The Anxious Truth? What led you there?
Oh, it's a good story. So I dealt with anxiety disorders like panic disorder, OCD, and depression for many, many years, on and off for a good 25 years of my life. As you can see by the gray in my beard, I got a few years under my belt. And over that time, the lessons that I learned, I have an undergraduate degree in architecture, actually. So I'm one of those weird guys that, is in a completely different field now. But I was always really interested in cognition and learning theory and behaviorism. So I stayed in touch with that stuff. And the lessons that I learned in getting past my anxiety disorders were so helpful to me. And I kind of made some friends online while I was really going through the bulk of my main recovery in like 2007, 2008. But I felt like I got so much support that I thought, well, I should just sort of pay this back into the universe. And I picked up a mic and started talking into it to nobody in 2014. And here we are in 2022. And I'm still doing that with a big ass podcast and books and all of that stuff. So that's how that started, out of my own personal experience and just a desire to try to pay back the help I got.
Completely understand. And when you started back in 2014, were you at a place of kind of like most of the struggle was behind you, or not really?
Yeah, at that point, I would say I was completely fully recovered. And we can talk about that, what that definition really is. But yes, it was behind me, and I was still sort of helping people online here and there, sort of ad hoc in different places. And somebody said, "Oh, you should have a podcast." And I'm like, well, all right. So I just made a podcast, and there you go.
Yeah, no, very just a quick comment. I relate very much to that first episode where like literally not a single person in the universe is listening. You're just putting it out there.
Talking to nobody in my living room. It's all good.
But yeah, we should talk about like the definition of recovery and many other things, but just, staying a little bit longer on the topic of like your own journey, what was your recovery journey like, and what helped you, and what insights really led you to where you found yourself?
Sure. So my recovery journey is based almost entirely on a cognitive behavioral approach to anxiety disorders, right? Which I know isn't for everybody. Some people don't like this stuff, and that's okay. So I basically learned not to not be anxious, but I learned to not be afraid of my own body and my mind anymore. Because that, by definition, those disorders are really based on not the fact that you are anxious, but the fact that you are anxious about being anxious, and you start to dig into your thoughts and your sensations and the symptoms, and they themselves become the driver of anxiety. That was me, textbook. 100%, I could be a chapter in a textbook. And I just learned by going toward those things. And there are methods, and there's a method to the madness. It's not just do it. This isn't a Nike commercial, but I learned that I was okay even when I was sure that I wasn't. And so then I stopped being afraid of anxiety and stopped being afraid of my thoughts and my own body. And then when you're not afraid of it anymore, magically, then it sort of goes away. So most people want to know, how do I overcome it? How do I stop it? Well, first you learn to not be afraid of it. And then the happy side effect is that it goes away.
Yeah. Exactly the same, same ideas that we teach here on our show as well.
Yeah.
Was it mostly like did you like educate yourself using like books and things of that nature?
Yes, excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought I turned up my mic. Yeah, I pretty much did. Like I said, I've always been a super like nerd, and I'll wear that mantle proudly for behaviorism and cognitive theory. And I don't know why. It was my undergraduate minor, which qualifies me to do absolutely nothing. We all know that. But I have my undergrad minor in behavioral psych, and I just stayed in touch with that. It's just a fascinating topic to me. So I'm the guy that actually reads the research, like instead of just the abstracts. And so I've always been that way. And I'm like, well, I know what to do, but I didn't do it because it's really scary to do those things, like let go, surrender, and allow the worst. But once I actually started to apply the principles, well, wouldn't you know it? It actually does work. So Yeah, I basically educated myself, and I've had the privilege of being able to do that. And now I'm in the process of being formally educated to make sure I'm not missing anything. So
All right.
yeah.
I hear. Well, so glad that struggle ended, and now, thousands and thousands of people are benefiting from this, of course. And now I wanted to talk to you about, like, again, like kind of like real big picture things. So, uh, it, this is a question I had for you, which was, if somebody asked you, like, you know, what is anxiety, or what is anxiety disorder? How do you answer that?
It's a good question, and it's really a really important question. It's almost the first question you have to ask, right? Because anxiety is just a normal part of being alive, right? Every human experiences anxiety at some point, maybe daily, maybe a couple times a week. Who knows? It's part of being alive. It serves a purpose. It's a warning sign. It teaches us to stay clear of danger. It's part of our threat detection and response system. It serves a purpose. It's supposed to be there. Anxiety disorder, being in a state of disordered anxiety, is where the anxiety comes before the danger. So disorder is almost literally, it's out of order. Usually there's a danger and then there's an anxious response to that. Very simplistic. But in our situation where you're in a disordered state, the anxiety itself becomes the danger. It flips. And so that's when you get people who decide that they have a lot of triggers, air quotes, I use air quotes. I can't go to the supermarket because I get anxious there. I can't go to restaurants. I get anxious there. If I don't sleep enough tonight, I will be really anxious about that. So the state of being anxious itself becomes the trigger for more anxiety. That's the disordered state.
Yeah, yeah, so well said. It's like, I often teach it very similarly, that it's like, anxiety is a sort of a message, and when we prepare of the message, it's like the brain wants to, like, we don't even want to hear the message. The brain pushes that message over and over again, and something very
Right.
similar to that, right?
Yeah, the message itself becomes the danger, which doesn't have to be, but we learn that. So,
Yes,
yeah.
very, very well. And now, you wrote yourself, like, the recovery and the definition of recovery, briefly before. Like, how would you define that?
Recovery, this is always interesting. And when people ask me that, some of the questions seem like real, like life coachy guru nonsense. But sometimes those are the answers. So recovery is when you don't ask if you're recovered anymore. Number one, I tell that. And why do you stop asking? Because you don't care anymore that you're anxious. That is recovery. Now, I don't mean to say that anybody listening can just decide to not care. You have to learn experientially that you don't have to care, because right now you believe you really do need to care. But recovered from a state of a disordered anxiety is that I don't worry anymore. I don't anticipate my anxiety. I don't find any deeper meaning in it. I have a normal, healthy relationship with it now. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean never anxious. That's not realistic. That's dead.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
Right.
No, that's a common. I'm sure you hear this a lot from your followers, but from in the insomnia realm too. Often somebody has been sleeping well for a while, and then says, "Wait a minute, I didn't sleep last night. What's wrong?" Having that expectation that once we're sort of past something, we'll never experience that again. But it's not that case, right?
No, it's not that case. I'm guessing that in your realm, you probably get asked all the time, do you ever get insomnia? And if you
Yeah.
say yes, then, well, clearly you're not. Why are you telling me anything? You're not recovered. I get asked all the time, can you still have panic attacks? Well, yeah, I don't know, maybe once a year, maybe. I just don't care if I have one today or not. That's the difference. So,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
guessing you might say, yeah, I might sleep like crap tonight. I just don't. It's okay.
It happens. It happens to all of us, for
Everybody.
sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, you know, I want to talk to you about a very, very common question, which I'm sure you get a lot too, which is tricky to answer, I think, sometimes. But it is this one: when somebody hears this, and they see kind of they see the idea that there is no real threat, and if I don't give it attention, then it actually goes away. If I don't think so much about this or focus so much about this, then things will be easier for me. How do you do that? How do you stop thinking about something or stop focusing on something? What do you answer to that?
Yeah, it's another really excellent question. It's like a foundational question, because when people ask that, they're thinking, this is so important. How can I not think about it? I must think about it, because thinking about it, trying to fix it, solve it, figure it out, protect against it, get away from it is critically important. So, how are you telling me to not think about this? So, the first thing I always tell people is we don't get to pick what we think about. You can choose to think about a thing. Like I could think about a hockey game right now if I want, but I can't choose to not think about a thing. So if you are really focused on how you feel because you feel it's really important, you are going to think about it. That's okay. The difference is in your engagement with that thought. Do you follow the thought? Do you start an inner dialogue? Do you answer it? Do you begin to argue with it? Do you begin to try to prove your thoughts wrong or find safety from your thoughts? Find certainty in the face of uncertain or scary thoughts? You don't have to do that. And that's where it breaks down, because they'll say, but if I don't do that, it feels worse. It feels really scary, wrong, irresponsible, reckless. And the answer is correct, that it does feel that way. But when you do it and the outcome is still neutral to positive, then you learn, oh, I was wrong. That wasn't reckless at all. I could have done that the whole time.
Yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's a simple plan. It's just really hard to execute because it requires bravery and courage and tenacity and commitment. It's hard.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. So well said. And I'll just sort of rephrase it in how I usually
Mhm.
look at it, and then curious to hear your comments. It's something akin to like we have been afraid of, let's say we've been afraid of something tangible, like a grizzly bear, right?
Mhm.
And then we're taught that there's actually nothing to fear. Then the next kind of step becomes, okay, I'm going to let this grizzly bear attack me and
Mhm.
not do anything, which naturally makes us even more scared because we've thought there was some danger there,
Mhm.
and it feels really, really scary. But then if we actually do that, then we see that nothing happened. We were completely safe, and that eventually leads, but we to kind of more peace of mind. But we can initially have more fear as we kind of go down this path, something like that. Does it make sense to you?
I would agree with that 100%. It's a perfect explanation to me. Because people will often say, but it feels worse. My anxiety level goes up when I do that. I use the word surrender all the time, which terrifies a lot of people. And well, what do you mean by surrender? I mean, give up the fight. Don't worry that you have these feelings. Don't worry that you have these thoughts, these scary thoughts and what ifs and symptoms. Just give up the fight. Let them do what they do, which is terrifying to people. I can't do that because then bad things. Well, what will happen? I'll have a heart attack. I'll go insane. I'll have a psychotic break. I'll pass out. I'll whatever. Like we all know, these imagined outcomes. And then you learn, even when I let go, I'm still okay. I'm capable of handling these things. Like I can move through that feeling. So yeah,
Yes.
it's really
Wow.
scary.
Well said. And I think, it's kind of all, every time I talk to someone, which is not often, but I talk to someone like yourself that, uh, has like maybe their own following, their own podcast, etc., and teaches a lot. I'm almost shocked by how similar the teaching is, like
Yeah.
in all these realms. But super nice to hear your versions of all these truths. And one thing that maybe I think we can maybe shift gear here now, because the for someone who's tuning in now and wants to learn more about anxiety or insomnia, like both of us have a lot of content on that. But something that I think will be really fascinating for your audience, for my audience, for everyone to hear a little bit more about is the following, because I'm curious about this now. Is as you're starting to get this kind of more formalized education
Mhm.
from a place where you've done, you know, things kind of on your own, like, are you finding like, oh yeah, I've already seen this, or are you learning new things, or what is it like?
That's a really good question. I appreciate that question. It's been an interesting thing. I'm about halfway through. I'll be a master's level therapist. I'm not in a doctoral program. I'm never doing that. So I don't have that kind of commitment in me. But I'm about halfway through, 40% through at this point. And what I am learning is that I am, as it turns out, as well versed as anybody in the theory and mechanics of anxiety disorders. But the practice of being an actual therapist or a counselor, there's a lot I don't know about that. So that has been incredibly valuable. One of the things that I find that I think you'll find interesting in your audience also, since they understand your message, and it sounds like we're very similar in the way we approach things, is it's interesting to be in a cohort full of therapists and training and qualified clinicians and therapists who are not only practicing clinicians, but also professors at the doctoral level who are teaching other therapists. My message, which is sounds like your message also, sticks out like a sore thumb in a room full of therapists. So one of the most interesting experiences that I had was immediately being at odds with some of my peers when I say, well, your thoughts don't always matter. And they immediately will say, of course they matter. You have to dig in, go in, introspect. And interestingly, having that little bit of debate and having highly qualified professors say, oh, no, 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 no. He's talking about a specific situation. Like if you run into the panic disorder person, talk to Drew. Like he's right. So I don't need to be right. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about knowing when to apply the concepts in what context. So I'm learning that in the therapy and counseling and mental health world, we are odd ducks. Like not
No,
everybody understands this or wants to, even it feels wrong to them. And I get that. I understand why it feels wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, very, very fascinating. And to when I hear this, to me, part of what I hear is that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is sort of the mainstay when it comes to, I think, both
Mhm.
anxiety, insomnia, and a lot of these inner struggles. But like a core idea in CBT is that we have to identify the thoughts, and then we have to like challenge them or change them or modify them, or to some degree, right? Or I see that there's some struggle coming from that. What are your thoughts on that?
So this is interesting. Like if you had asked me that 5 or 7 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, that's what this is all about. And there's value in that 100%. I don't devalue that. That's more of like I don't want to get too technical, but that's like a second wave behaviorism thing, which is, well, we care about the content of thoughts. We challenge them. We fact check them. We analyze them to see that they're not true. And we change our thoughts. But really the third wave modalities that we care about now are more about flexibility and acceptance and navigation skills. So you don't know whether that thought is true or not in the end, because we can never get 100% certainty, but we can navigate through that uncertainty rather than trying to challenge and change the thought. So we lead now with behavior that accepts the possible negative consequence and navigates through it to learn that, oh, my thought changes on the tail end when my behavior changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I totally see things, I think, very, very similar to how you do it. But I was curious if let me just ask you, like, why do you think your message stuck out like a sore thumb? Was it because of that, or something different?
No, it is because of that. Because in mental health circles, I understand. Look, people go into the helping professions for all kinds of different reasons, right? Everybody's trying to help at their core, but everybody brings their own experiences. And I think what most people think of as therapy is based on you sit and talk about how you feel. You talk about your feelings. You're addressing past pain and experiences and trauma. And yeah, that's real. I'm not discounting that. That's real. But in these specific cases, like the way it seems you might approach sleep disturbance and the way I approach anxiety disorders, that is not a helpful therapy. You might need multiple types of therapy to address multiple problems. That's true. And they may dovetail. But the reason why it sticks out like a sore thumb is that most people who are going in my experience, personal experience, most people who are going into this profession are going into it because they have a connection on an emotional, spiritual, mental, whatever, personal identity level with introspection, digging, getting in touch with your feelings, healing pain. And it's really hard to be like the engineer or the mechanic of the room that says it's not always about healing pain, guys. Like sometimes it's about putting out a fire first, and then you can go and heal your pain. You can't heal pain when you're burning. So like we'll put out the fire and then go and heal some pain. I'm
Yeah,
all for healing pain, but first things first. So that's why it sticks out. It's
uh,
a very specialized thing.
totally here.
A lot of words. Sorry.
Not at all. This is super nice getting to pick your brain here. And uh, what one thing I just have to ask you, because I'm curious about this, is um, I'm sure you're very well aware that there's a lot of people that are going the route of, like, having had to struggle with anxiety, for example, themselves, gaining a lot of understanding, like you have, and then going towards like the coach realm and becoming like a coach instead. Did that ever cross your mind, or how do you feel about that?
Okay. Well, that's a good question. I'll answer it. I'm always pretty transparent guy. I have a problem with it, to be honest with you. Like there is a difference. And first of all, let me be completely clear about this. My podcast I'm fortunate, it's relatively large and I have a pretty large audience. I have hundreds of people who wave money at me to coach them, but it's not right for me to do that. And the more I learn in my formal education on the process of counseling and therapy, the more I know that I'm making the right choice. Lived experience matters a lot. And I think it will make me a better therapist when it comes to treating anxiety disorders because I lived it. But just knowing a few things, having read a few books, having had some panic attacks and overcome it, does not make me qualified to be responsible for the mental health one-on-one with an individual, because it is rarely as cut and dry as it's just panic attacks and we could just keep giving you, hammering the same message at you again and again and again about exposures. Sometimes, but sometimes not. So the nuance of providing therapy, it's unpopular, but it goes beyond like, oh yeah, I went and did a three month web thing and now I'm a coach.
Yeah, no, I think It's totally hear it, and it's you know, it's very. I love to have this, you know, your opinion, because we're literally doing what you're skeptical about, you know, and so
Yeah.
and I think we're in an interesting juncture. You know, I think there's, as you know, coaching is unregulated. There's
Right.
no, you know, the future will, I think, determine where things go in terms of like you know,
Mhm.
where the future heads. But another kind of big picture question I had for you was this one. I think would you agree with me if I say that most people that struggle with these like inner struggles, like anxiety, insomnia, etc., are
Right.
not getting the help they need?
I completely agree with that. So on the flip side of me being a little bit against, here's the issue with coaching. Like, I mean, you're a physician, so I get it. Like you've done your time, you've done your training. I respect that in a big way. But there are also people, like you said, coaching is unregulated. So anybody can decide that they're a coach and say whatever they want and take your money to do that. And that's dangerous. Okay. But I also understand that if you were to say only therapists at the master's level, doctoral level, physicians can do this, we are dying for good mental health care in the West. I'm sure in the whole world. So we do have to be a little bit smarter about expanding that definition. I'm 100% in agreement with that. We cannot gatekeep this too strictly because more people need help than can get it right now. 100% true. Totally true. Especially in this area. I deal with it every time. Like I've been through 3 therapists. Nobody seems to understand the thing you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, I know, because there's not that many of us trained in this. So it's hard. We should be expanding those borders, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. And let me ask you this. Now I think, I mean, you've seen, like, you with your own eyes how powerful you know, technology can be, like having a
Mhm.
podcast and reaching a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, but on the flip side, you know, mass media like can work the other way around. We have like people Google stuff, and there's so much unhelpful information out there. So overall, like if we like look in the crystal ball, like 10 years, 20 years from now, do you see things moving towards like a more peaceful place, you know, for people struggling, or do you think like there's kind of, it's tricky? How do you see things going?
That's a good question because I think, look, and this is the thing I talk about all the time. And I recently did a podcast episode about sleep anxiety, and you should come on my show. We should talk about this. But that's some of the worst information. I don't know what your thought. I would love to know your thoughts on this because I know there's one book out there that caused a huge furor a few years ago. You probably know the book. You know, the guy is a respected guy, but he made a lot of statements that really overstepped, and they had to walk back. But yet, people already read them. You know, 700,000 people read this that says, "If I don't sleep for 8 hours a day, I might get cancer." So the internet is always going to be full of that because that gets eyeballs and attention, unfortunately. So the internet is not designed to be accurate, educational, helpful, or informative. It's designed to be attention getting. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I think part of the mission for people like you and I is to try to at least educate people on how to consume that information.
Yeah, like, well
Yeah.
said. I've never actually thought of it that way, but it makes perfect sense to me that the information is going to be put out there,
Mhm.
and then people like us can help, you know,
Interpret
interpret
it.
it, or like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I,
Yesterday, I
I
talked a little bit about like when is a good time to do research, not when you're terrified. You're a terrible
yeah.
consumer of information when you're terrified. So little tips like that, or look at the source. Where does it come from? Is it a news article on HuffPo, or is it an actual research abstract? Is it peer reviewed? Those are hard things, but we can help with that stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I actually, when was this? Maybe 3 months ago or something. I started a new like a playlist or a new series on my YouTube channel called Heard Online, which is just like taking things that people hear online and like really looking through them.
Yeah.
And I think the sleep world is just so sad, honestly, because it's like completely littered with like just scaremongering, you know. And the tricky thing is like when there's this kind of game of like you know, telephone going on, you know, that childhood game, you know,
Yeah.
whisper to each other's ears, right?
Yeah.
Where there's an article coming up from academia, and then media takes parts of it and just like creates the most scary headline you can ever imagine, right?
Right.
So you can look at that the scary headline from like CNN or wherever, but
Yeah.
even if you look at the research articles, sometimes there's there are tricky things there too. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work actually educating on this.
It is a lot of work. And it's honestly, in fairness to everybody, whether it's us as educators or people consuming it as the end user, it's a lot of work to consume it too. I get that. When you are desperate for answers, you don't want to read 18 peer-reviewed papers and try to draw a conclusion from a consensus. You want that CNN 60-second or 90-second video blurb to give you an answer and make you feel safer. And they almost never do that. They're not designed to make you feel safer. So it's really hard. Nobody wants to dig through a study that studied one particular variable in a multivariate system and drew some inferences as to what we might want to study next, which, as you know, is most studies do that.
Yes.
That doesn't assure me that I won't get cancer if I have insomnia. That doesn't tell me anything. It's not good for me. I throw it out. I'm going to go to HuffPo again, or the wellnessnews.net or whatever the crazy crackpot site is. I agree. The anxiety world is full of that too. Sleep and anxiety, man. It is full of it. Full of it.
Yeah. Well, at least there's a lot for us to do, which, by the way, I wanted to ask you this one. You started your podcast 2014 and you're still putting out content regularly. And, when I started, I was like, in the first 4 weeks or so, I'm like, I'm going to run out of ideas, but that has not happened, but it's clearly not happening to you either, huh?
No, you are not going to, you're not going to run out of any ideas anytime soon. One of the things that I love, that I feel privileged to be able to do, is that my podcast now fuels itself. So with a large audience and a really large and engaged social media community, I just get to listen to people. So I know what they want to talk about. And then some things I can't talk about, or I won't for various reasons, but other things, there's plenty of conversation. There's plenty of questions, plenty of topics. I'm never going to run out of stuff to talk about. People ask me all the time, like, you do this every week. I write a morning newsletter 4 days a week about this. Like, are you going to run out of stuff? No, clearly you guys keep giving me things. So yeah, no problem.
No, it's an inspiration seeing it for sure. And now, maybe final question here for you. I think we covered so much already, but really curious about, what are the next steps for you as you get your master's? What's next?
I'm a little bit the king of making it up as I go along. I'm not going to lie. I've never had a plan for this. It was never designed to be a business or some sort of social media influencer empire. I'm the worst influencer ever. Admittedly, I'm not good at any of this. So I don't know what's next. I will finish my degree. I'll do my clinical hours. I'll get my license. And then I do know that I do want to do one-on-one help for sure. But I also enjoy my role as a psychoeducator and being able to teach on a large scale. So this will continue. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm literally making it up day by day in many instances. That's not good, but it's truth.
I don't know. I love it. I just want to share with the audience here that when we got in touch by email, I was like, I maybe we can talk about this. And you literally emailed me saying, like, I don't plan anything. All caps.
And I have a pathological need to not
this guy.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It's a flaw. It's a personality flaw. I will resist the plan anytime I can. It's worked out for me, but I could probably do it better.
Now I have kind of one more question that came up from that. Like, when we struggle with insomnia, anxiety, etc., oftentimes it is because we actually attempting to have control over things we can't control, right?
Yep.
So the version of Drew that's like, I don't plan anything, was that always like within you, or did that come after the insights after the struggle and all that?
You're a really good interview, Dan. I appreciate this. That is a great question. No, that's always been me. I have always been wing it kind of guy. But what I did learn, and maybe, I don't know if this relates in your topic or not, I bet it does, but I had to learn, my screen blanking software, I forgot to turn it off. What I had to learn in the recovery process is that I did need more structure in that, not control, but routine. Because for anxious people, if you're making your decisions minute by minute based on what you're afraid of in that moment, you'll always make bad decisions that lead you back deeper into the hole. So I had to adopt some routine in my recovery, which I hated, but really helped me. So my recovery actually helped me be a little bit more structured today than I used to be. And so I think I have pretty much, I hope, a happy balance. I think. Probably not, but better than it was. So yeah, I was always that guy. Always make it up as I go along guy.
Fascinating. Just maybe this will be the last question, or maybe this will be the last question after the last question. I don't know. But, this leads me to then, what type of routines did you sort of have to create then?
Okay. So in recovery from things like panic disorder or agoraphobia, to me, it's pretty well borne out, but this is what I will teach people all the time is, the first thing you have to do is do not wake up in the morning, which is a little bit sleep related, and then lay there thinking about and evaluating how you feel. And then therefore what you think you can, air quotes, do that day. The night before, I'm going to make a plan. When I get up, I will immediately put my feet on the floor, immediately go to the bathroom, take care of some personal hygiene stuff, brush my teeth, even if I have to brush my teeth while I'm having a panic attack. I will put on
Yes.
some clothing. I will make a cup of tea. I will have a banana, whatever it is. I will get out the door and I will do some exposure work. So I really had to structure that in a big way. What a difference that made for me, as opposed to let me first see how I feel and then decide what I can or cannot do, was a
Yes.
bad idea and tends to be
Yes.
a really bad idea.
Wow.
Yeah. And in the sleep realm, when I have people, and you definitely have to come on my podcast for sure to address this, but anxious people often have, will have sleep disturbances, like transient sleep disturbances, and then they call them disasters. And then, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm still not asleep yet. So I better change my entire rest of the 4 days to accommodate this because I'm going to be incapable. No, your plan was to do this. So you'll have to do it tired today.
Yeah. No, that is it's always like when we, as you said, when we're not letting whatever happened at night decide what our day is going to be like. This is so helpful. We see that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm so glad because I just remembered one of these kind of big picture questions that I really want to ask you, and it's the following. I'm going to kind of present like in 1 minute presentation of kind of an idea and get your take on it.
Okay.
One of the sort of like key insights for me during this journey was that insomnia, if you look at like DSM-4,
Mhm.
insomnia is classified as a sleep disorder, which it just says like if you have trouble sleeping 3 more weeks per, this time, then you have insomnia, which doesn't make much sense. But then if you look at the definition of a phobia,
Mhm.
then things are like, aha, you're scared of something. And the more you're trying to avoid that, the more you're telling your brain that this is something to be scared of. And then the more struggle you have. And when you look at insomnia in the light of a phobia, where you're scared of being awake, you're scared of not sleeping.
Mhm.
And the more you try to avoid that, the more scared you become. Then it's like, aha, it makes sense. But then the next step kind of in my mind becomes maybe we have sort of misclassified a lot of these like internal struggles. Maybe they're all like phobic in nature. Uh, and like, because when we look at things of a phobia, then like the therapy for a phobia, or the way to meet a phobia, is really like exposure therapy, right?
Right.
Which makes so much sense when it comes to insomnia.
Mhm.
So my question to you is like, how do you think about this idea that it's all phobias?
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. You could make the argument. This gets into a really big answer. We could talk about this for hours, I bet. I think you could make the argument that almost many, I won't say all, but many mental health issues could be treated as phobias. I think that's possible. I see the conflict most is in the overlap between anxiety disorders and trauma resolution. Because in the end, even trauma resolution has a whole lot of phobia treatment, aspects to it. That's true. So anytime that you take a real problem, it's an actual trauma is a real problem. Not sleeping is certainly an issue. It's not optimal. Nobody wants it. Anything we're afraid of could be based on real rational fear. I get that. But when our response to it goes off the rails, that's when we have to start to treat it like a phobia. So I think we would do well to try to at least incorporate some of that thinking into many different situations. It's not
Yes.
always black and white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that. It's a great, great, great topic. That's a great
We'll
topic.
we'll expand on it sometime, but
I'll have to do another one. We'll do a 2-hour episode on just on
right?
that. So,
Love it. But for now, I'll just say it was super, super nice talking to Drew, and I hope to have you back, and maybe I'll be guesting on the show. We'll keep
yeah.
talking for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. I appreciated this. Thank you for the invite.
All right.
Great.
Have a lovely day.
You
Bye
too.
now.